Bernard Herrmann was an American composer known for his work in motion pictures. An Academy Award winner, Herrmann is particularly known for his collaborations with director Alfred Hitchcock, most famously Psycho, North by Northwest, The Man Who Knew Too Much, and Vertigo. He also composed scores for many other movies, including Citizen Kane, The Day the Earth Stood Still, The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, Cape Fear, and Taxi Driver. He worked extensively in radio drama, composed the scores for several fantasy films by Ray Harryhausen, and many TV programs, including Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone and Have Guna Will Travel. Early life and career: Herrmann, the son of a Jewish middle-class family of Russian origin, was born in New York City as Max Herrmann. He attended high school at DeWitt Clinton High School, at that time on 10th Avenue and 59th Street in New York City. His father encouraged music activity, taking him to the opera, and encouraging him to learn the violin. After winning a composition prize at the age of 13, he decided to concentrate on music, and went to New York University where he studied with Percy Grainger and Philip James. He also studied at the Juilliard School and, at the age of 20, formed his own orchestra, the New Chamber Orchestra of New York. In 1934, he joined the Columbia Broadcasting System as a staff conductor. Within 2 years he was appointed music director of the Columbia Workshop, an experimental radio drama series for which Herrmann composed or arranged music. Within 9 years, he had become chief conductor to the CBS Symphony Orchestra. He was responsible for introducing more new works to U.S. audience than any other conductor. He was a particular champion of Charles Ives music, which was virtually unknown at that time. Herrmann's radio programs of concert music, which were broadcast under such titles as Invitation to Music and Exploring Music, were planned in an unconventional way and featured rarely heard music, old and new, which was not heard in public concert halls. Examples include broadcasts devoted to music of famous amateurs or of notable royal personages, such as the music of Frederick the Great of Prussia, Henry VIII, Charles I, Louis XIII and so on. Herrmann's many U.S. broadcast premieres during the 1940s included Mayakovsky's 22nd Symphony, Gianfrancesco Malipiero's Third Symphony, Richard Arnell's First Symphony, Edmund Weber's Third Symphony and Ives' Third Symphony. He performed the works of Hermann Goes, Alexander Grachaninov, Niels Gade and Franz Liszt, and received many outstanding American musical awards and grants for his unusual programming and championship of little-known composers. In Dictators of the Baton, David Ewan wrote that Herrmann was one of the most invigorating influences in the radio music of the past decade. Also during the 1940s, Herrmann's own concert music was taken up and played by such celebrated maestri as Leopold Stokowski, Sir John Barbirolli, Sir Thomas Beecham and Eugene Ormandy. Between two movies made by Orson Welles, he wrote the score for William Dietrich's The Devil and Daniel Webster, for which he won his only Oscar. In 1947, Herrmann scored the atmospheric music for The Ghost and Mrs. Muir. In 1951 his score for The Day the Earth Stood Still featured the theremin. In 1934, Herrmann met a young CBS secretary and aspiring writer, Lucille Fletcher. Fletcher was impressed with Herrmann's work, and the two began a 5-year courtship. Marriage was delayed by the objections of Fletcher's parents, who disliked the fact that Herrmann was a Jew and were put off by what they viewed as his abrasive personality. The couple finally married on October 2, 1939. Fletcher was to become a noted radio screenwriter, and she and Herrmann collaborated on several projects throughout their career. He contributed the score to the famed 1941 radio presentation of Fletcher's original story, The Hitchhiker, on the Orson Welles show. And Fletcher helped to write the libretto for his operatic adaptation of Wuthering Heights. The couple divorced in 1948. The next year he married Lucille's cousin, Lucy Anderson. That marriage lasted 16 years, until 1964. Collaboration with Orson Welles. While at CBS, Herrmann met Orson Welles, and wrote or arranged scores for radio shows in which Welles appeared or wrote, such as the Columbia Workshop, Welles's Mercury Theatre on the Air and Campbell Playhouse series, which were radio adaptations of literature and film. He conducted the live performances, including Welles's famous adaptation of H. G. Wells's The War of the Worlds, broadcast on October 30, 1938, which consisted entirely of pre-existing music. Herrmann used large sections of his score for the inaugural broadcast of the Campbell Playhouse, an adaptation of Rebecca, for the feature film Jane Eyre, the third film in which Welles starred. When Welles gained his RKO Pictures contract, Herrmann worked for him. He wrote his first film score for Citizen Kane and received an Academy Award nomination for Best Score of a Dramatic Picture. He composed the score for Welles's second film, The Magnificent Ambersons. Like the film itself, the music was heavily edited by the studio, RKO Pictures. When more than half of his score was removed from the soundtrack, Herrmann bitterly severed his ties with the film and promised legal action if his name were not removed from the credits. Herrmann also created the music for Welles's CBS radio series The Orson Welles Show, which included the debut of his wife Lucille Fletcher's suspense classic, The Hitchhiker. Serling Unlimited, a program conceived to glorify the aviation industry and dramatize its role in World War II. And the Mercury Summer Theatre on the Air. Benny Herrmann was an intimate member of the family, Welles told filmmaker Peter Bogdanovich. Collaboration with Alfred Hitchcock, Herrmann is most closely associated with the director Alfred Hitchcock. He wrote the scores for 7 Hitchcock films, From the Trouble with Harry to Marnie, a period which included Vertigo, North by Northwest, and Psycho. He also was credited as sound consultant on The Birds, as there was no actual music in the film as such, only electronically made bird sounds. The film score for the remake of The Man Who Knew Too Much was composed by Herrmann, but 2 of the most significant pieces of music in the film are the song, Que Sera, Sera, and the Storm Clouds cantata played in the Royal Albert Hall are not by Herrmann. However, this film did give Herrmann the opportunity for an on-screen appearance. He is the conductor of the London Symphony Orchestra in the Albert Hall scene. Herrmann's most recognizable music is from another Hitchcock film, Psycho. Unusual for a thriller at the time, the score uses only the string section of the orchestra. The screeching violin music heard during the famous shower scene is one of the most famous moments in film score history. His score for Vertigo is seen as just as masterful. In many of the key scenes Hitchcock let Herrmann's score take center stage, a score whose melodies, echoing the Liebestod from Richard Wagner's Tristan und Isolde, dramatically convey the main character's obsessive love for the woman he tries to shape into a long-dead, past love. A notable feature of the Vertigo score is the ominous 2-note falling motif that opens the suite. It is a direct musical imitation of the 2 notes sounded by the foghorns located at either side of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. This motif has direct relevance to the film, since the horns can be clearly heard sounding in just this manner at Fort Point, the spot where a key incident occurs involving the character played by Kim Novak. However, according to Dan Alia, author of Vertigo, the making of a Hitchcock classic, Herrmann deeply regretted being unable to conduct his composition for Vertigo. A musician's strike in America meant that it was actually conducted in England by Muir Matheson. Herrmann always personally conducted his own works, and while he considered the composition among his best works, he regarded it as a missed opportunity. In a question-and-answer session at George Eastman House in October 1973, Herrmann stated that, unlike most film composers who did not have any creative input into the style and tone of the score, he insisted on creative control as a condition of accepting a scoring assignment. "I have the final say, or I don't unregistered trademark do the music." The reason for insisting on this is simply, compared to Orson Welles, a man of great musical culture, most other directors are just babes in the woods. If you were to follow their taste, the music would be awful. There are exceptions. I once did a film The Devil and Daniel Webster with a wonderful director William Dietrich. He was also a man of great musical culture. And Hitchcock, you know, is very sensitive. He leaves me alone. It depends on the person. But if I have to take what a director says, unregistered trademark rather not do the film. I find unregistered trademark impossible to work that way. Herrmann stated that Hitchcock would invite him onto the production of a film and, depending on his decision about the length of the music, either expand or contract the scene. It was Hitchcock who asked Herrmann for the recognition scene at the end of Vertigo to be played with music. In 1963, Herrmann began writing original music for the CBS TV anthology series, The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, which was in its 8th season. Hitchcock himself served only as advisor on the show, which he hosted, but Herrmann was again working with former Mercury Theatre actor Norman Lloyd, co-producer of the series. Herrmann scored 17 episodes and, like much of his work for CBS, the music was frequently reused for other programs. Herrmann's relationship with Hitchcock came to an abrupt end when they disagreed over the score for Torn Curtain. Reportedly pressured by Universal executives, Hitchcock wanted a score that was more jazz and pop influenced. Hitchcock's biographer, Patrick McGilligan, stated that Hitchcock was worried about becoming old-fashioned and felt that Herrmann's music had to change with the times as well. Herrmann initially accepted the offer, but then decided to score the film according to his own ideas. Hitchcock listened to only the prelude of the score before confronting Herrmann about the pop score. Herrmann, equally incensed, bellowed, "Look, Hitch, you can't out-jump your own shadow. And you don't make pop pictures. What do you want with me? I don't write pop music." Hitchcock unrelentingly insisted that Herrmann change the score, violating Herrmann's general claim to the creative control he had always been maintained in their previous work together. Herrmann then said, "Hitch, what's the use of my doing more with you? I had a career before you, and I will afterwards." The score was rejected and replaced with one by John Addison. According to McGilligan, Herrmann later tried to reconcile with Hitchcock, but Hitchcock refused to see him. Herrmann's widow Norma Herrmann disputed this in a conversation with Gar 1/4 NTHERK paragraph G for the Bernard Herrmann Society in 2004. "I met Hitchcock very briefly. Everybody says they never spoke again. I met him, it was cool, it was not a warm meeting. It was in Universal Studios, this must be 69, 70, 71-ish. And we were in Universal for some other reason, and Herrmann said, 'See that tiny little office over there, that Euro unregistered trademark Hitch. And that stupid little parking place. Hitch used to have an empire with big offices and a big staff. Then they made it down to half that size, then they made it to half that size Euro. We are going over to say hello.'" Actually, Herrmann got a record. He was always intending to give him a record he just made. But it wasn't a Euro unregistered trademark TA film thing. It was either Moby Dick or something of his concert pieces to take it and give to Hitch. Peggy, Hitchcock, a Euro unregistered trademark secretary, was there. Hitch came out. Benny said, "I thought you were a Euro unregistered trademark D, like a copy of this. How are you?" etc. And he introduced me. And Hitchcock was cool, but they did meet. They met, I was there. And when Herrmann came out again, he said, "A Euro OE, what a great reduction in Hitch, a Euro unregistered trademark status." In 2009, Norma Herrmann began to auction off her husband's personal collection on Bonhams.com, adding more interesting details to the two men's relationship. While Herrmann had brought Hitchcock a copy of his classical work after the breakup, Hitchcock had given Herrmann a copy of his 1967 interview book with French section War Truffaut, which he inscribed to Benny with "My fondest wishes, Hitch." This is rather interesting, because it comes a year after Hitchcock had abruptly fired Herrmann from his work scoring Torn Curtain, and indicates Hitchcock may have hoped to mend fences with Herrmann and have him score his next film, Topaz, reported Wellsnet, the Orson Welles website, in April 2009. Of course, once Herrmann felt he had been wronged, he was not going to say yes to Hitchcock unless he was courted, and it seems unlikely that Hitchcock would be willing to do that, although apparently Hitchcock did ask Herrmann back to score his last film Family Plot right before Herrmann died. Herrmann, who had a full schedule of films planned for 1976, including De Palma Euro unregistered trademark Carrie, The 7% Solution, and Larry Cohen Euro unregistered trademark God Told Me To, was reportedly happy to be in a position to ignore Hitchcock's unregistered trademark's reunion offer. Herrmann's unused score for Torn Curtain was commercially recorded after his death, initially by Elmer Bernstein for his Film Music Collection subscription record label, and later, in a concert suite adapted by Christopher Palmer, by Esa-Pekka Salonen and the Los Angeles Philharmonic for Sony. Some of Herrmann's cues for Torn Curtain were later post-synced to the final cut, where they showed how remarkably attuned the composer was to the action, and how, arguably, more effective his score could have been. Later Life and Death, from the late 1950s to the mid-1960s, Herrmann scored a series of notable mythically themed fantasy films, including Journey to the Center of the Earth and the Ray Harryhausen Dynamation epics Jason and the Argonauts, Mysterious Island, The Three Worlds of Gulliver, and The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. During the same period, Herrmann turned his talents to writing scores for television shows. Perhaps most notably, he wrote the scores for several well-known episodes of the original Twilight Zone series, including the lesser-known theme used during the series' first season, as well as the opening theme to If Guna Will Travel. In the mid-1960s he composed the highly regarded music score for Frina Section War Truffaut's Fahrenheit 451. Scored for strings, two harps, vibraphone, xylophone and glockenspiel, Herrmann's score created a driving, neurotic mood that perfectly suited the film. It also had a direct influence on producer George Martin's staccato string arrangement for Beatles' 1966 smash hit single Eleanor Rigby. By 1967 Herrmann worked almost exclusively in England. In November 1967, the 56-year-old composer married 27-year-old journalist Norma Shepherd, his third wife. In August 1971 the Herrmanns made London their permanent home. Herrmann's last film scores included Sisters and Obsession for Brian De Palma. His final film soundtrack, and the last work he completed before his death, was his somber score for Taxi Driver, directed by Martin Scorsese. It was De Palma who had suggested to Scorsese to use the composer. Immediately after finishing the recording of the Taxi Driver soundtrack on December 23, 1975, Herrmann viewed the rough cut of what was to be his next film assignment, Larry Cohen's God Told Me To, and dined with Cohen, after which he returned to his hotel for the night. Bernard Herrmann died from cardiovascular disease in his sleep at his hotel in Los Angeles, during the night. Scorsese and Cohen dedicated both Taxi Driver and God Told Me To Herrmann's memory. In a 2011 interview on a TCM television special, Steven Spielberg recalls Herrmann's last day. Taxi Driver director and Spielberg's friend Martin Scorsese called him over to Warner Brothers studio on December 23, 1975 to meet the famed film composer. There, Spielberg met Herrmann, whom he recalled as a very rotund man chomping on a big cigar, and very gracious for the professional praise from the young filmmaker. Other works, as well as his many film scores, Herrmann wrote several concert pieces, including a symphony in 1941. The opera Wuthering Heights. The cantata Moby Dick, dedicated to Charles Ives. And For the Fallen, a tribute to the soldiers who died in battle in World War II, among others. He recorded all these compositions, and several others, for the Unicorn label during his last years in London. Compositional style and philosophy. Herrmann's music is typified by frequent use of ostinati, novel orchestration and, in his film scores, an ability to portray character traits not altogether obvious from other elements of the film. Early in his life, Herrmann committed himself to a creed of personal integrity at the price of unpopularity, the quintessential artist. His philosophy is summarized by a favorite Tolstoy quote, "Eagles fly alone and sparrows fly in flocks." Thus, Herrmann would only compose music for films when he was allowed the artistic liberty to compose what he wished without the director getting in the way. As already indicated, this was the cause of the split with Hitchcock after over a decade of composing scores for the director's films. His philosophy of orchestrating film was based on the assumption that the musicians were selected and hired for the recording session, that this music was not constrained to the musical forces of the concert hall. For example, His use of 10 harps and beneath the 12-mile reef created an extraordinary underwater-like sonic landscape. His use of 4 alto flutes in Citizen Kane contributed to the creepy opening, only matched by the use of 12 flutes in his unused Horn Curtain score. And his use of the serpent in White Witch Doctor is possibly the first use of that instrument in a film score. Herrmann said in an interview, "To orchestrate is like a thumbprint. I can't understand having someone else do it. It would be like someone putting color to your paintings." Herrmann subscribed to the belief since held by many that the best film music should be able to stand on its own legs when detached from the film for which it was originally written. To this end, he made several well-known recordings for Decca of arrangements of his own film music as well as music of other prominent composers. Use of electronic instruments. Herrmann's involvement with electronic musical instruments dates back to 1951, when he used the theremin in The Day the Earth Stood Still. Robert B. Sexton has noted that this score involved the use of treble and bass theremins, electric strings, bass, prepared piano, and guitar together with various pianos and harps, electronic organs, brass, and percussion, and that Herrmann treated the theremins as a truly orchestral section. Herrmann was a sound consultant on The Byrds, which made extensive use of an electronic instrument called the mixture trautonium, although the instrument was performed by Oscar Sala on the film a unregistered trademark soundtrack. Herrmann used several electronic instruments on his score of E to unregistered trademark Alive, as well as the Moog synthesizer for the main themes in Endless Night and Sisters. Legacy and recording. Herrmann is still a prominent figure in the world of film music today, despite his death over 35 years ago. As such, his career has been studied extensively by biographers and documentarians. His string-only score for Psycho, for example, set the standard when it became a new way to write music for thrillers. In 1992 a documentary, Music for the Movies, Bernard Herrmann, was made about him. Also in 1992 a 2.5-hour-long National Public Radio documentary was produced on his life via Bernard Herrmann, a celebration of his life and music. In 1991, Stephen C. Smith wrote a Herrmann biography titled A Heart at Fire's Center, a quotation from a favorite Stephen Spender poem of Herrmann's. His music continues to be used in films and recordings after his death. Georgie's theme from Herrmann's score for the 1968 film Twisted Nerve is whistled by one-eyed nurse Elle Driver in the hospital corridor scene in Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill Volume 1. The opening theme from Vertigo was used in the prologue to Lady Gaga's Born This Way video, and during a flashback sequence in the pilot episode of FX's American Horror Story, which also featured Georgie's theme in later episodes as a recurring musical motif for the character of Tate. Fellow film composer Danny Elfman adapted Herrmann's music for Psycho for use in director Gus Van Sant's 1998 remake and borrowed from Herrmann's Mountain Top Sunrise theme, from Journey to the Center of the Earth, for his main Batman theme. On their 1977 album Ra, American progressive rock group Utopia also adapted Mountain Top Sunrise, in a rock arrangement, as the introduction to the album's opening song, Communion with the Sun, and most recently, Ludovic Boos used the love theme from Vertigo literally in the last reels of 2011's The Artist. Herrmann's film music is well represented on disc. His friend, John Stephen Lasher, has produced several albums featuring ear-text recordings, including Battle of Ntva, Citizen Kane, The Kentuckian, The Magnificent Ambersons, The Night Digger and Sisters, under various labels owned by Fifth Continent Australia Proprietary Limited. Herrmann was an early and enthusiastic proponent of the music of Charles Ives. He met Ives in the early 1940s, performed many of his works while conductor of the CBS Symphony Orchestra, and conducted the world premiere performance of Ives' Second Symphony with the London Symphony Orchestra on his first visit to London in 1956. Herrmann later made a recording of the work in 1970, and this reunion with the LSO, after more than a decade, was significant to him for several reasons. He had long hoped to record his own interpretation of the symphony, feeling that Leonard Bernstein's 1951 version was overblown and inaccurate. On a personal level, It also served to assuage Herrmann's long-held feeling that he had been snubbed by the orchestra after his first visit in 1956. The notoriously prickly composer had also been enraged by the recent appointment of the LSO's new chief conductor Andrew Copyright Previn, who Herrmann detested, and deprecatingly referred to as that jazz boy. Herrmann was also an ardent champion of the Romantic-era composer Joachim Raff, whose music had fallen into near oblivion by the 1960s. During the 1940s, Herrmann has played Raff's Third and Fifth Symphonies in his CBS radio broadcasts. In May 1970, Herrmann conducted the world premiere recording of Raff's Fifth Symphony Lenore for the Unicorn label, which he mainly financed himself. The recording did not attract much notice in its time, despite receiving excellent reviews, but is now considered a major turning point in the rehabilitation of Raff as a composer. In 1996, Sony Classical released a recording of Herrmann's music, the film scores, performed by the Los Angeles Philharmonic under the baton of Esa-Pekka Salonen. This disc received the 1998 Cannes Classical Music Award for Best 20th Century Orchestral Recording. It was also nominated for the 1998 Grammy Award for Best Engineered Album, Classical. In 2004 Sony Classical re-released the superb recording at a budget price in its Great Performances series. Decca has reissued on CD a series of Phase 4 stereo recordings with Herrmann conducting the London Philharmonic Orchestra, mostly in excerpts from his various film scores, including one devoted to music from several of the Hitchcock films. In the liner notes for the Hitchcock Phase 4 album, Herrmann said that the suite from The Trouble with Harry was a portrait of Hitch. Another album was devoted to his fantasy film scores, a few of them being the films of the special effects animator Ray Harryhausen, including music from The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad and The Three Worlds of Gulliver. His other Phase 4 stereo LPs of the 1970s included music from the great film classics and the fantasy world of Bernard Herrmann. Fellow composers Richard Band, Graham Revell, Christopher Young, Danny Elfman and Brian Tyler consider Herrmann to be a major inspiration. In 1985, Richard Band's opening theme to Reanimator borrows heavily from Herrmann's opening score to Psycho. In 1990, Graham Revell had adapted Herrmann's music from Psycho for its television sequel-prequel Psycho 4, The Beginning. Revell's early orchestral music during the early 90s, such as Child's Play 2 as well as the 1963 The Twilight Zone episode Living Doll, were very similar to Herrmann's work. Also, Revell's score for the video game Call of Duty 2 was very much a reminiscent of Herrmann's very rare WWII music scores such as The Naked and the Dead and Battle of Ntva. Young, who was a jazz drummer at first, listened to Herrmann's works which convinced him to be a film composer. Elfman has said he first became interested in film music upon seeing The Day the Earth Stood Still, and he paid homage to that score in his music for Mars Attacks. Tyler's score for Bill Paxton's film Frailty was greatly influenced by Herrmann's film music. Sir George Martin, best known for producing and often adding orchestration to the Beatles' music, cites Herrmann as an influence in his own work, particularly in Martin's scoring of the Beatles' song Eleanor Rigby. Martin later expanded on this as an extended suite for McCartney's 1984 film Give My Regards to Broad Street, which features a very recognizable homage to Herrmann's score for Psycho. Avant-garde composer-producer John Zorn, in the biographical film A Bookshelf on Top of the Sky, cited Bernard Herrmann as one of his favorite composers and a major influence. Elmer Bernstein adapted and arranged Herrmann's original score from J. Lee Thompson's Cape Fear, and used it for the 1991 Martin Scorsese remake. After Bernstein realized there was not enough music in the score from the original film, he added sections from Herrmann's unused score for Hitchcock's Torn Curtain, including the music composed for the murder of the character Gronk. The score for Cape Fear evokes both the gathering clouds of the destructive hurricane and the murderous intent of killer Max Cady. Bernstein also recorded Herrmann's score for The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, which was released in 1975 on the Varese Sarabande label, later reissued on CD in the 1990s. Charles Gerhardt conducted a 1974 RCA recording entitled The Classic Film Scores of Bernard Herrmann with the National Philharmonic Orchestra. It featured suites from Citizen Kane and White Witch Doctor, along with music from On Dangerous Ground, Beneath the 12-Mile Reef, and the Hangover Square Piano Concerto. During his last years in England, between 1966 and 1975, Herrmann made several LPs of other composers' music for assorted record labels. These included Phase 4 stereo recordings of Gustav Holst's The Planets and Charles Ives's Second Symphony, as well as an album entitled The Impressionists, and another entitled The Four Faces of Jazz. As well as recording his own film music in Phase 4 stereo, he made LPs of movie scores by others, such as Great Shakespearean Films, and Great British Film Music. For Unicorn Records, he recorded several of his own concert hall works, including the cantata Moby Dick, his opera Wuthering Heights, his symphony, and the suites Wells raises Cain and the Devil and Daniel Webster. Pristine Audio has released 2 CDs of Herrmann's radio broadcasts. One is devoted to a CBS program from 1945 that features music by Handel, Vaughan Williams and Elgar. The other is devoted to works by Charles Ives, Robert Russell Bennett and Herrmann himself. Accolades, Academy Awards. These awards and nominations are recorded by the Motion Picture Academy of Arts and Sciences. 1941 winner, Music Score of a Dramatic Picture, The Devil and Daniel Webster. 1941, nominee, Music Score of a Dramatic Motion Picture, Citizen Kane. 1946, nominee, Music Score of a Dramatic Picture, Anna and the King of Siam. 1976, nominee, Original Score, Obsession. 1976, nominee, Original Score, Taxi Driver, American Film Institute. In 2005, the American Film Institute respectively ranked Herrmann's scores for Psycho and Vertigo number 4 and number 12 on their list of the 25 greatest film scores. His scores for the following films were also nominated for the list: Citizen Kane, All That Money Can Buy, Jane Eyre, The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, The Day the Earth Stood Still, North by Northwest, Taxi Driver, British Academy Film Awards, 1976, winner, British Academy Film Award, Best Film Music, Taxi Driver. In popular culture, part of Herrmann's score for The Trouble with Harry was used in a 2010 U.S. television commercial for the Volkswagen CC. Music from the Vertigo soundtrack was used in BBC 4's Spitfire Women documentary, aired in the UK in September 2010. A 2011 TV commercial entitled Snowpocalypse for Dodge all-wheel drive vehicles uses Herrmann's main title theme for Cape Fear. Gimme Some More by Busta Rhymes is based on a sample from Herrmann's score from Psycho. The prologue to Lady Gaga's 2011 video for the song Born This Way features Herrmann's Vertigo prelude. The 2011 FX series American Horror Story has used cues from Twisted Nerve, Psycho, and Vertigo for episode scores. The 2011 film The Artist used a soundtrack recording of the Love theme from Vertigo. Film actress Kim Novak later voiced her concern about the use of the music, saying that her work had been violated by the film, The Artist. Paul Skakman portrayed Herrmann in the 2012 biopic Hitchcock. The whistle song from Twisted Nerve was used as an opening theme for the Quentin Tarantino film Kill Bill, Volume 1. Film scores, radio scores, melodramas. These works are for narrator and full orchestra, intended to be broadcast over the radio. In a 1938 broadcast of the Columbia Workshop, Herrmann distinguished melodrama from melodrame, and explained that these works are not part of the former, but the latter. The 1935 works were composed before June 1935. La Belle Dame sans Merci, The City of Brass, Annabel Lee, Poem Cycle, The Willow Leaf, Weep No More, Sad Fountains, Something Tells. A Shropshire Lad, Cynara, incidental music for radio shows and dramas. See also Columbia Workshop for programs in which Herrmann participated but did not write original music. Palmolive Beauty Box, Doorbell, Rhythm of the Jute Mill, Gods of the Mountain, A Christmas Carol, A Child is Born, Brave New World, Stage Works, Wuthering Heights, Opera, The King of Schnorr's musical comedy, concert works, The Forest, Tone Poem for Large Orchestra, November Dusk, Tone Poem for Large Orchestra, Tempest and Storm, Furies Shrieking. For piano, The Dancing Faun and the Bells, 2 songs for medium voice and small chamber orchestra, Ray Harrihausen, violin and piano, Twilight, violin and piano, Marche Militaire, ballet music for Americana Review, aria for flute and harp, variations on Deep River, and Water Boy, prelude to Anathema, for 15 instruments, Silent Noon, for 14 instruments, The Body Beautiful, music from the Broadway play, Nocturne and Scherzo, Sinfonietta for strings, Curia and Ives Suite, violin concerto, unfinished, Moby Dick, cantata, Johnny Appleseed, unfinished cantata, symphony, The Fantastics, The Devil and Daniel Webster Suite, for the Fallen, Wells raises Kane, Echoes, string. Quartet, Souvenirs de Voyage, see also. Columbia Workshop, a radio series for which Herrmann was music director and composed or arranged many episodes. High Anxiety, a comedy spoof that parodies many Hitchcock devices including Herrmann's music. Hitchcock and Herrmann, a stage play about the relationship between Herrmann and Alfred Hitchcock. Selected bibliography, Smith, Stephen C. A. Hart at Fires Center, The Life and Music of Bernard Herrmann. U.S. University of California Press. ISBN A0-520-07123-9. Cooper, David. Bernard Herrmann's Vertigo, a Film Score Handbook. U.S. Greenwood Press. ISBN A0-313-31490. Cooper, David. Bernard Herrmann's The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, a Film Score Guide. U.S. Scarecrow Press. ISBN A0-8108-5679-4. Johnson, Edward. Bernard Herrmann, Hollywood's music dramatist, forward by Miklos Reza. Rick Mansworth, UK, Triad Press, bibliographical series No. 6. Prodigals, Jorm, Wagner, unregistered trademark S. Heritage in Cinema, The Bernard Herrmann Case in, Stop, Sebastian. Film in Concert. Film scores and their relation to classical concert music. Glang Quarter CKSSTADT, Germany, VWH Verlag. PA 45-62. ISBN A978-3-86488060-5. References. External links: The Bernard Herrmann Estate, The Bernard Herrmann Society, Bernard Herrmann at the Internet Movie Database, Bernard Herrmann Discography at Discogs, Bernard Herrmann Papers, at the University of California, Santa Barbara Library. Bernard Herrmann, The Early Years, Bernard Herrmann at soundtrackguide.net, Bernard Herrmann, A Celebration of His Life and Music, Bernard Herrmann, A Centennial Tribute, Gramophone Magazine Obituary, February 1976. Citizen Kane, The Classic Film Scores of Bernard Herrmann at Allmusic, Bernard Herrmann at Find a Grave, Bernard Herrmann at 1000 AA CBS News.